Working our magic. We're actually at the church tonight, so I don't know how the Wi-Fi is. I think the Wi-Fi is better down here than it is upstairs. All right. Will you check?
There we go. There we go.
All right, perfect.
So glad to have all of you joining us on Facebook Live. If you'd like to interact with us tonight, you may leave comments and questions on the comment section on our Facebook Live. We would love to interact and hear from you tonight. Or if you're watching this on our YouTube channel later, you can always leave a comment. We check these periodically, and we'd love to have you engage with us, as well as those who have joined us on Zoom tonight. Reverend Kate has been leading us through conversations, as well as us having great guest speakers who have engaged this issue of race and the gospel. My name is Pastor Micah Nutter Dowling, and I will be starting us off with prayer tonight, and then I'll kick it over to Reverend Caitlin, who is moderating our discussion time.
They call me Pastor Kate, not Reverend Caitlin.
Oh, that's right. Pastor Kate. Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Creator God, you have made all in your image. We have stained that image with racist remarks, and furthermore have taken prejudice and made it law. Through this, people of color have suffered greatly and continue to, Lord. As we could lift up so many names that have become hashtags and memorial names for those who have been killed through vicious acts of racism, even this very week. Lord, help us repent, turn, and live in an anti-racist way, recognizing our privilege, recognizing the ways that we have been complicit in white supremacy and through silence have enacted in violence. So we give you tonight this conversation, guide our ears, guide our hearts as we look to move to action in faith and courage. And we do all this in your awesome name. Amen.
Amen. All right. So thank you so much for that prayer. You've got a question from a parent on Facebook right now.
Oh, I see that.
They're wondering how we can be in two different places at once because we've got a fundraiser going on outside right now at Westminster. Anyway, so my question for tonight, and there are some folks who emailed me saying that they couldn't join us right away, so they'll be joining us later. So we believe that education should lead us to actions, right? We don't just do education for education's sake. And so we've been educated or educating ourselves for the past 5 weeks on the gospel and race and how they go hand in hand. And actually, Lafayette, you guys have been doing it a little bit longer. We just joined you for the last 6 weeks, but you guys have really spent the whole summer starting out with MLK Jr.'s letter to a Birmingham jail and then leading us to here. And so the question is, now that we have those educated things and we've heard from lots of different voices, is what's our next steps? What are some ideas? What are some things that you've been thinking about on ways that we could make our churches a more anti-racist institution?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Mike, it's more for Micah, but did we form a committee or something at church?
Yes.
What is it and where is it in the process, so to speak?
So 2 session meetings ago, our session engaged the idea of starting a social justice committee in response of injustice we see in our world at this time, and also as an encouragement for us to move to action, which is a great point to talk about tonight. So Lafayette developed a foundation and guidelines for what this committee would be last session meeting, and have officially formed this committee literally as of this week. You will be receiving an email and more information about the members that have joined and your opportunity to be a part in the coming weeks to follow, Paul. So we are infant new, but we are hoping that our first activity officially as a committee will be to be a part of a day of service that the Presbyterian Church has called all churches to this Sunday, August 30th at MLK Park. So look for more information coming your way about that, and I will post the link for the information about that day of service on our
Oh, we have that already, I
chat
believe.
session tonight as well.
It's a week of service, actually, not.
It's a
or-
week of service, but Sunday
Week of
is the
action,
day,
sorry.
week of action. The Sunday is the day of service.
So that's an exciting news that kind of, I think it predated this study, but actually this study kind of made it happen a little bit faster, I would say, that committee now exists. And we plan on taking the things that happen on that committee, or the things that we talk about tonight, to that committee for maybe some ideas. So John, do you have any ideas?
Well, we want to, who is the guy, what's his name, who says you can't talk about racism, you have to talk about anti-racism.
Mm-hmm.
You have to become an anti-racist. And there's only one way in which you can do that, frankly, is to get involved with Black people. Work with them. You can't possibly be a racist, or I'm not going to say that.
It's
You're
harder to be
understanding.
racist, right?
Right. You're less likely to be racist if you're working with Black people regularly, which we at Westminster do through our Racial Justice Committee. We're supporting Bailey Green, which is a very important renewal area in the east side of Buffalo, starting at Bailey and Ferry and coming west about 5 blocks, and then going north or south to Genesee Street and north of Skajackwada Park. I have offered to lead a caravan of Westminster people who are interested. They would follow my car, and I would take them on a tour of Bailey Green. And at each place, I would explain what's going on and how Westminster member John Summers has set this up. John is a very amazing man, and I'd love to tell the story. Once you get involved in that story and you see how people are doing it, once you get away from the west side and our comfortable neighborhood, across the main street and really see the east side, then you'll understand. And the other person who was here last week was Jerome Wright. And I don't know if he'll be here tonight. He's a very busy man.
Yeah,
He
is.
has taken us and would be happy to give us a tour of what he's doing at Elam Christian Fellowship, which is in the old Central Park Plaza. And if you don't know the story of Central Park Plaza, there's a gang there. And there's also a gang on the Fruit Belt. And a couple of weeks ago, a guy was sitting in a parked car behind a parking lot on Delaware Avenue, about 3 blocks from where I live. And he was shot. And they say it was because of a conflict between those two gangs.
Mm.
Well, I think we have to learn about this. White people have to learn what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll offer that as another opportunity.
You know, I think that's so important, John, what you were just talking about. And I think so often we see in the news or we see in media kind of gangs, and we would wonder, why would anyone join that? Like, why, why would that be attractive to anyone? But when we start to think about things systemically and how families have just been torn apart. People of color families have been torn apart from jailing and from the prison construct and all of that, and how many people, how many just from friends of ours don't have mothers or fathers or brothers. Like so many of my friends from Detroit lost so many of their siblings for various reasons, and talked about how gangs, as violent as they were like family.
Yeah,
and like
that's
looked
it.
out for them and like were protectors when they didn't have dads, like because their dads were up in like prison industry or things like that. I don't want to justify that stereotype, because that is the stereotype, but I just think about, even like if I didn't have any siblings and I didn't have any parents, how maybe that would be attractive, the idea of like protectors or family members, you know.
Well, I've heard, and I've been talking to people about this for a long time. There are some intelligent people who say gangs give them a sense of belonging and a sense of love,
And like purpose. Yeah.
purpose in life.
Yeah. That's so.
We have to, realize where we've left a gap in community and in reaching out at the relationships, as you're talking about,
Mentorship.
Dr.
things.
John. We left the gap that allowed the gangs to come in and offer what we were not offering.
Okay, well, that's the other thing, and that's what you've got to try to do. And right now, this country has magnificent opportunities to open those doors. You've got to talk to these gangs, and I've done this with Jerome Wright at his church, where we did talk to members of the Central Park gang. This was a few years ago. And you listen to them. You don't preach to them. You don't tell them what to do. You listen to them. And people like Jerome Wright are very good at letting these young people talk about what's really bothering them. White people need to be involved in this sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amen.
I want to welcome those on Facebook. We have about 6 people joining us on Facebook Live right now. If you have a question or
An
a
idea.
comment about what action items can we take in the area of becoming an anti-racist church, community, or in our personal lives, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. So Phil, Dr. Martin, anybody? The question that we opened up with tonight is, what are some action items? What are some ideas about what we can do to become a more anti-racist institution, city, community, kind of just what Michael was talking about.
I've had
Well, you could become a school teacher. I'm sorry. I mean, there are 4,500 school teachers in Buffalo, and they deal with this every day. You're not telling them anything that they don't know, and they probably see the best of it, not the worst of it, So if you're a school teacher, what you teach is analytic skills and, cognitive skills, writing, and your job is as probably the society's first social worker that child is going to meet at 5 or 6, is that there's hope and that there's a sense of belonging. But we seem to not even do that for adults. So, the question is, how do you do that? And then there's the other side of the coin, which is most children need a mother and a father. And we don't have a society that speaks well for mothers and fathers. I've been watching the fundamentalists for a long time, and the divorce rate for them is slightly higher than the general population, as noted by the news today. And Jerry Falwell Jr., this 3-way thing going with whoever. And, so a kid leaves home knowing he's loved by a mother and a father. That does an awful lot to buy a sense of security. And I'm not sure, certainly white people should be involved in this, but how do we get programs that help? And I'm going to hog the microphone for 2 minutes. And the guy who I think, and I've been looking at this for a long time, the social guy that had the most power, that could do anything about this that we had, was Richard Nixon. Okay. And Richard Nixon was, well, obviously he's a Quaker, so he had religious background and morals. And, you know, he's a politician, so he had to make some compromises along the way, some of which I voted for him twice. Well, no, I can't say that I voted for McGovern, but I voted for him once. And, but in any case, his programs were very pro-family. The first was everyone has a guaranteed national income. That way, that gets rid of the whole notion of having a welfare class. Like my friends in California objected to Mexican Americans and Black people getting welfare for their children who were illegitimate. Okay, all these labels separate society and they don't solve much. So, you know, if everyone has a guaranteed national income, this is Richard Nixon, by the way, the great liberal. And so he recommended that. The second thing he recommended was full employment, and that gets rid of quotas. I mean, look at what Buffalo has had to deal with in hiring minority teachers. You know, the Curtin decision is now 40 years old. And the city was found in violation because we have what my student Stefan Mihailu points out is the friends and family plan. So just because you're not hiring minorities doesn't mean you're getting the most competent people. You're getting friends and family. And, you know, it's taken 40 years in the city not to comply to the Curtin decision. That's got to be some kind of record for incompetence. Okay. And, but Nixon was in favor of quotas, quotas. You know, like when I was in the Navy, I was a navigator on a destroyer. There was a quota. There are 400 destroyers, you needed 2,000 navigators. And of course, Nixon was in favor of a coordinated society. He understood, as did Eisenhower, that we were a very powerful agricultural, industrial, technological, science, and space society, and that we could afford some of these things. But the other thing that Richard Nixon then understood was you're not going to get people for this society unless you train them. So, of course, he's the one who believed in free education. You know, none of this, what is it, $160 trillion debt for loans for college? Free education. That way everyone gets a start, and it's probably cheaper. I used to be, because I have good math skills, I was head cost accountant for Raytheon's missile division in Mountain View. I've got a good head for numbers. There was enough money to do this, according to Richard Nixon. Now, you may not like Richard Nixon, and you can make the case that he was a communist if you like, but I don't think so. And the other thing he was in favor of, which would help anyone, especially young mothers with children and no fathers, was national health insurance. And then the 32-hour work week, which would mean we'd have more time to spend with our families at home, which is a real sin. My friends, I went to a conference on Grand Island, and some friends came who were sociologists from Norway, and I asked them what they thought of the country. They said, "You guys work all the time." Well, if you're working all the time, you have no time for your kids, right? Here's a Mustang and some money. Don't buy any drugs now. You know, this haunting feeling of loneliness that you have. Well, that's not natural. You're going to, you know, you're going to go to Stanford and you'll be all right. Well, you know, at what point, you know, Phil would tell, at what point does a society fall apart because we're not taking care of very basic human things?
Yeah, and
Yes.
I think what you were getting to at the beginning of that is so important. You said mother and father. We of course believe that any two people, I think what the bigger point there is that people need people who love them in their lives.
Yeah, it's vital. It's vital. Yeah.
Exactly. And, there's a statistic that just came out that said, if this is for LGBT people, which of course are also Black people, there's Black LGBT people.
Yeah.
It's an intersectional thing. And it says that if they have just one trusted adult in their life, their odds of either attempting suicide or completing it goes down by almost 75%.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily need to be a parent. That could be a pastor, that could be a mentor, a confirmation mentor, that could be
true.
Anyone in the church. So I think that's an action item, or I don't know about an action item, but an idea that we could have, that reaching out to young people, especially Black young people, especially LGBT people who don't, maybe for whatever reason or another, systemic or not, might not have a trusted adult in their life that says, I love you, and looks them in the eye and asks them how their week was. I think that's something that could change the world, Micah has something from Facebook, and then Phil, I'd love to jump to you.
I want to bring in Facebook Live. Thank you, the 7 or 8 that have joined us, as well as my sister, Mercy Dowling from Birmingham, Alabama. So glad to have you, Mercy. Jen from Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church lifts up the book by Father Gregory Boyle, Tattoos on the Heart, particularly in regard to gangs and that kind of ministry, Dr. McClive. And then we have a comment from our speaker a couple of weeks ago, Drew Ludwig, Pastor Drew Ludwig. And he talks about one of the easiest things that white people can do is financially support Black organizers. So as you were talking about teachers, Dr. Martin, we also have to think about how are we financially supporting our teachers?
Oh, and people who are like people who are leading Voice Buffalo. A lot of the people who are doing Voice Buffalo are not paid for that. They are doing that out of their extra time, whatever extra time they have.
Or Black Love Resist in the Rust Belt.
Or any kind of these Black organizers. That's what
Drew.
Dr. Ludwig, not Dr. Ludwig, Reverend Ludwig was talking about is a lot of these people are doing a lot of work for free. And so whether it's donating to those organizations or just something that I've been trying to do with my tithing is just reaching out to them and saying, hey, is there something that I can fund? Is there a book that you've been wanting? Is there something that I can give you money for that, is something that could be helpful to you, whether it's them personally or the organization itself. And I've found that that's a really good way to reach out. So Phil, I'd love to jump over to you.
Your question was about our church, wasn't it? How can we
be a more anti-racist institution? Yeah.
And my thinking over these past 6 weeks is, here we are in the 6th session, and on it, in my screen anyway, we have 6 participants, and you have another 6 who are tuned in some other way.
Yeah, we've got Facebook people that come in and out regularly.
And I think that's sufficient argument for doing it again. Shortly after 9/11, Westminster established the Understanding Islam series, and we did that every single year for how many? 3 weeks a time, John? Was it a three week?
Full month. It was always
And-
For the Lenten dinners, right?
And we got a tremendous reputation for that, and it was a really positive. And this has been a terrific idea, but we got very poor response. And I think we as a downtown church with energy and imagination, I think we ought to do this again.
Yeah, speaking of, actually, I have contacted Jerome Wright, who was here with us last Tuesday night. And I've contacted him about doing a section 2, an epilogue, if you might say, a one-off time, sometime in September or October, to have him come and talk about Holt and his ministry there and how we can support that. So this won't be the end of the conversation, and especially won't be the end. And we both of us have committees that will hopefully lead our congregations in keeping this up at the forefront. But also as pastors, we've made commitments to keep on talking about this from the pulpit, in our prayers, and in various things. And if we don't, hold us accountable.
And in a way, all of us can keep the conversation going is with the actions we take. This coming Sunday, the week of service, as Drew has mentioned, there's a lot of ways to be active. The way you give, the way you vote, the way you teach. As Dr. McClive mentioned, what neighborhoods you take your walk in, where the intentionality of your relationships, where you choose to live, where you choose to go to the store. There's a lot of ways that we can take baby steps right now. Even a sign out in front of your church, that might seem like a small baby step. Well, I would challenge us, if it's such a baby step, why haven't we done it?
Well, and a big thing that Garrett, I know that Garrett's here listening in, Garrett has talked about, and I've even witnessed it just at my short time here at Westminster, is how having a pride flag hanging from our pole has been a reason why people have stopped into our worship service. They knew nothing about us other than that flag was on the pole, and that said something to them about, okay, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll try it out here. Or people who were here and like discovering who they were, growing up, and recognizing that this was a safe place for them, it just means something. And so, even though it might seem like a baby step, it might seem like, okay, how is that going to change the world? I think a sign is so much more important than we think it is. Even if
Well, I want to commend both of you for organizing this. And I just want to say, let's keep talking and publicize it much more widely than we did this series. If I may suggest, one shot here and one shot there is not what I'm talking about doing another series.
And
Maybe in the fall, or the topic is not going to go away. The event in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and that little cartoon I sent around, I hope you all saw it, with two black kids looking for signs that something is happening. They're not sure yet, but maybe, and we've got to keep talking. We absolutely have to keep talking.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
I'd like to, I don't watch the local news as much as I used to, the way our TV system is set up. But every so often on the local news, when something happens, and I think it's a minority organization, I don't think it's exclusive, but that's what I see. And I'm not sure, I think their title is Fathers Against Violence. I think they operate primarily on the east side. They do some things like they're even present, I believe, as the smaller kids are dismissed from school, so that there's some adults, along their walk. Anyway, to go what Drew was saying about supportive of other organizations, and part of what Dr. Phil was saying in terms of keeping the conversation going, is if we do another series on this, we might try to include someone from them, find out what they do.
Good. I like that. Good suggestion.
Was Drew's organization Surge? One of the principles they said is not that we go jump in and say, here's what we're going to do, but find out from them what we can do to be supportive of them.
Right. It's so important, because I think sometimes we come with our own solution.
Is that the same thing, John?
Stop the Violence Coalition. Is that
That's
it?
different, isn't it?
Very good.
No,
Let me tell you about this.
This is Fathers Against Violence, but
Earlier on, I offered to lead groups to Bailey Green and talk about the good things that are going on the east side. This is the Stop the Violence Coalition. It's part of the Buffalo Peacemakers. That is a arm of Buffalo government, and it's headed up by Pastor Giles, who's the head of Voice Buffalo. Now, we're in touch with all those people, and if the members of our church could meet them, and we could arrange this, like Westminster in our fundraising that we're doing now for the Pinnacle, part of that is going to mission. And that mission is supporting Bailey Green
Mm.
and the house that the Buffalo Peacemakers are trying to restore, where kids in the afternoon can safely meet, especially good for kids who don't have anybody at home during that time. And they can safely meet. Now, I'd love to be able to show all this to you, and I could. If you want to set up a caravan, I'll be happy to be the lead car.
Okay, yeah, we'll email kind of our regulars and see. But if not, even just Micah and I being new to the area, we live on the east side, and that's something that we also wanted to mention is that there's little things that you can do, and there's also big things that you can do. And some of those things, we were listening to the PCUSA Week of Action. There was a roundtable today that I cannot cannot recommend higher than what I'm going to, but it's on the Facebook page for the Presbyterian Church USA. If you go to it, there's a round table today, and it was just amazing. But something that they said, or something that one of the reverends said, he's a pastor out in California, is he said, at the end of the day, the rubber's going to hit the road, and it is going to cost us something too. It's going to cost white people something. It's not just going to be just the easy stuff. It's going to be the hard stuff too. And that was a suggestion that Mike and I were talking about is, I know it's big, but maybe it involves moving to the east side. Maybe it involves something smaller, is maybe just grocery shopping on the east side, or going for a walk on the east side, or putting your kids in school on the east side. Things like that might seem a little crazy, but I think if we're serious about this work, it's something that, is at least think about it,
I have two other ideas. One, just listening to what Caitlin just said, I don't know how we would do this, but to develop a list, when you're talking about where you shop and things, a list of minority businesses that from time to time we might be able to support.
Yeah.
Simply, first of all, my wife's applauding because it's local business, but simply do. But the other idea I had,
even in our catering, right? As a church, catering to a local place instead of, Wegmans is great, but that's normally who we do our catering through. But what if we did it through, one of the places at, the West Side Bazaar, or
again, I don't know how we develop that list, but that's one idea. The other idea I have, let me preface it. Years ago, the school I taught in was collecting books to donate to a Buffalo school, elementary school. And I just kind of went off on my own because I like getting lost in bookstores and buying kids' books. And when I went down, and I was still teaching, so I couldn't do this, but when I went down, the principal kept telling me what she really needed. She appreciated the books, but what she really needed was adults to come in and read to the younger kids. During reading time and things like that. When the teachers got X number of kids in the room, they can't read, you read in small groups.
That one-on-one.
I don't know if it's possible how we would do this, Dr. Martin. You might know, having taught in the Buffalo schools, who we could contact to find an elementary school or two where we could just go in one day a week at, again, not us dictating at their and read to the younger kids,
Sure.
Which I'm prejudiced. I'm a big believer. The more we can help them learn to read, the better we are down the future.
And
I
Paul,
don't see that there would be much opposition to that. The
I
difficulty is,
just don't know how to get started in there.
yeah,
Paul, I
yeah.
want to let you know such a list does exist.
Yeah.
Black-owned businesses actually going very near Elmwood Village there and throughout Buffalo. And I've just attached that and pasted that on the Facebook page, our church Facebook page. And for us Zooming tonight, Caitlin will put it in the chat.
Yeah.
I used to do that at Kensington High School for about 4 years. We would go over there and read because it was so important for the kids to read and try to understand what they learned. And I took those books and I gave them to the energy program at Westminster Church. Something else I wanted to point out, a very important part of Bailey Green is the fact that we have urban farms that are trying to raise good food on the east side. There are actually 15 urban farms in western New York that are all trying to raise food and bring it to the people who live in those neighborhoods. And if you go to Bailey Green with me, I'll show you one of the gardens, and I'll also show you another garden that is sponsoring this program, because we not only cut down on the overhead. I mean, people through these urban farms can get food at very, very low cost, and it's good for them. You know, there's a lot of problems with African Americans and being overweight and fighting obesity and heart problems and all that goes with it. And so that's another part of what they're trying to do in Bailey Green, is bring wellness teaching to the east side. Now, not many people on the west side realize that there's only one supermarket on the entire east side. It's in a plaza at the corner of Jefferson and Utica, and it's a Top store.
Yeah.
And the other thing most whites don't realize is that most blacks don't have cars. They can't afford them. They rely on bus transportation. And how can you do your shopping if you have to do it by bus? So that's another service that I know of. What the churches on the east side offer is a van that takes people to shop in Tops Markets or even Wegmans. Those are the kinds of things that really matter to people. Okay, you help them with putting food in their belly and they're going to like you.
The thing with
You're muted. So.
the thing with Tops, Betty Jean Grant, you may know her. She was head of the legislature for a while, is a dear friend. And she complains, as do some of her friends, Esther Smothers, that Tops serves inferior food compared to the other Tops, and that they can't find items there. So part of the process, I think it has to be a process, is to be able to air some of these grievances with Tops and say, well, you know, the stuff we hear that the stuff you have for sale is, you know, sometimes too old and wilted, and you know, the cans are kind of greasy looking, and that kind of thing is sort of a minor advocacy. But there's certainly, you know, a very well organized Black community here, which could use support. For example, this father's thing sounds tremendous to me. And, you know, most kids, I mean, I was so lucky to have a good father. So, you know, we didn't have much, but one thing I do is I couldn't get away from my father. So, you know, he was just very, very hovering, and in a very good way. That's what fathers are supposed to be. But the thing is that they might be able to use some money for tickets for a theater. You know, like, what do you want to do? You want to go to a movie? Well, that takes money. You know, you take 5 kids, and that's at least $50 without popcorn. You know.
Yeah, a friend of ours actually, who's an educator and a youth pastor, actually he came and preached at my installation. He was the African-American Baptist preacher back in January. He's a friend of ours. Anyway, and he talked about the importance of seeing, of Black young people seeing themselves on the screen. And so he just put it out on Facebook, you know, I mean, so much of this is relational, that he needed 25 tickets to go see the Black Panther, you know, which was just like such a hit. And was so big for Black young men, especially to see. That is
Reverend Brandon Perkins, who is not only a pastor and works with youth, but is a history teacher, Paul.
Yeah. So definitely lots of
You can't get away from us.
No, you can't. But you know, that's so important. Again, that would have been something that I wouldn't think, you know, would be a solution. But when we go ahead and ask the people that we're trying to serve,
Yeah.
what's something that could help you? Well, a lot of those kids couldn't afford to go to the movie theater. And so the church rented out the whole theater just for them. And thankfully they had, some budget, they had some money behind them, but he asked for some of us just to send money. And it was so easy. It was like $7.25. And I got to know that like that 2 teenagers got to go see a movie where they saw themselves on the big screen for the first time. And what a big thing that is for someone,
Yeah. Well, this is not going to be this is a long haul. I mean, think about it this way. I don't want to draw attention to me, but I guess I will. Try not to call me narcissistic here. I read Blues for Mr. Charlie in 1962. And in that book, it was very clear that James Baldwin, was saying very clearly that this was a problem for white people and it wasn't going to go away. And that was half a century ago. Okay. And everybody loved James Baldwin. I mean, he was very popular. And certainly not Louis Farrakhan, and he was very popular. He said the obvious. And you have to think, well, what took so long? What's taking so long? And I think what's taking so long is that this is not a rational problem. It's an irrational problem.
It's a fear-based problem, yeah.
And the problem is people are not comfortable being next to each other on this issue. So how do you break that down? Well, it's a slow process of breaking it down. And, you might have to do it with movie tickets or golf games or whatever. I'm not very clever about this kind of thing, but I do know that there are a lot of students who are in need of attention. I'll give you, during the Gulf War with Kuwait, I used to take the bus. My students thought I was on welfare. And I said, no, we're going to war in the Gulf for oil. So maybe if we take the bus and ride our bicycles. So I had kind of a nice rep with them. They kind of joked about Dr. Martin taking the bus and, whatever. Being fully aware of our union scale, which is all right. So in any case, I'd be downtown near Hodgson Russ and the malls, and the kids would be, sometimes the young black males would be intimidating. And, sometimes the ladies would feel a little uncomfortable riding the subway. And, I got sort of the reputation for working in the school. So I had a little bit of authority. And the parallel here isn't me. The parallel is to get people in positions who have authority, who know how to touch people in their hearts. So, we'd get on the train or the bus and I'd say, what are you doing? These people are terrified of you. And they recognize the teacher voice, like, okay, because, we weren't going to run around mugging each other at school. It happens, but not that often. And, they'd behave, they take on a different persona. And, one of the things to realize is that the kids who are in these gangs are people. And we can either do things that use biblical language, open up their hearts, or we can do things that create the hardness of hearts. And that's the problem, because that's the effective domain that we have to work on with not only Black people, but white people.
That's what I was about to say. We have to look at our own hearts, and,
Yes.
and the assumptions that we make about people, when we are like the assumption that they made about you, that you were on welfare because you rode the bus.
Yes.
Well, and especially like in churches, I think about, how, well, I want to say especially in the South, but I know it's up here too, how what church you belong to says something about class, says something about, who you are, or how much money you make, or, what kind of, how you dress when you come to worship, what kind of car you come in if you do drive to
Right,
worship.
like how come ecumenical only means partnering with the fancy churches closest to us?
Right.
Why does ecumenical mean going across Main Street and asking a congregation of non-white parishioners to join us in a service.
Yeah, like I asked even when I first started here, I said, oh, how come, I looked at a list of things. This was for something kind of unrelated, but related. I was looking at a list of the churches that we invited, and I just noticed that there was no Methodist churches on this list. And so I thought, oh, I guess Methodists just aren't big in Buffalo. There must just not be any Methodists in Buffalo. But then I was on a call that Reverend Beth Hennessy, who's our pastoral care associate pastor here at Westminster, put together with Reverend George Nichols. And he is AME, which is still Methodist, but American Methodist Episcopal.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so there's just no white Methodists here, but there's black Methodists here, and so the importance of reaching out, even when we are doing something ecumenical, making sure that it truly is ecumenical, not just in denomination, but also racially.
I wanted to mention 2 action items. I'm actually hosting a youth fundraiser as we speak, but my advisors are handling it. Thank you so much, Chris and Roger and Sari and Bob and others, and Gabrielle, our young adult leader. I just want to mention 2 action items, particularly for Presbyterian Christians. One is this week. This is the PCUSA Week of Action. We put the link on your chat and comment section. The Presbyterians across the country are engaging in social witness through a variety of ways. There's film screenings, there's table talks.
The round table that I was talking about today, it was
round
today.
tables,
Yeah.
there is solidarity in what we wear. And then there's the day of service, which Westminster and Lafayette are engaging in this Sunday at 4 p.m. at MLK Park on the east side. We're doing a cleanup. Our youth and young adults will be leading this, but all are welcome. If you want to come, let me know. We'd love to have you come and be a part of this day of service. And then number 2, I think challenging our congregations to pledge and make the commitment to become a Matthew 25 congregation. Just like we have encouraged churches to become Earth Justice congregations or more like congregations in solidarity with LGBTQ plus folks. This is a way that the church can make a statement and pledge and commitment to becoming an anti-racist organization and have it documented by the session as a commitment of the church going forward. I know we have a lot of statements as Presbyterians, and that can seem monotonous, but I think making this statement could be an important first step toward a church committing as a congregation to be in solidarity with people on the margins and to work toward becoming anti-racist and working on the vitality of the church. So I put the link to this Matthew 25 congregation in the chat and on the Facebook page as well. And I'm going to wish good evening to all of you as I get back to my students, and I leave it in the capable hands of Pastor Kate. Thank you all.
Yeah, so we'll have about 10 more minutes and then we'll finish up, but we're gonna send Mike on his way to finich up.
I'll second Micah's motion. I think that's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
Before he leaves, how many, or Caitlin, how many groups are participating in the MLK Park cleanup?
So we're the youth and the young adult group together is kind of
How many other groups? I mean,
like just from Westminster?
how many other churches?
Oh, it's just Westminster and Lafayette, but there's churches all over the country that are also doing similar events. I don't know how many. I would guess, a significant amount.
But you've
So
got-
this is a bunch of white kids going into a black park to clean up.
Clean up and have conversation about why are certain parks more taken care of by the city than other parks? Why do certain parts of we're gonna have a conversation about why do certain parts of our city have parks and while other ones don't? Why certain areas of our town have street lights and lots of greenery and things like that, whereas other sides, like the Olmsted Parkway is beautiful, right? But it stops. It doesn't go to Main, it doesn't go to the east side. So we're gonna
Are
clean
there
up
any
there.
sponsors of this event on the east side? Any participants on the east side?
No, we didn't. I mean, this is just kind of something that Micah and I came up with. We were pushed by the Presbyterian Church about 2 weeks ago saying that they were doing this week of action. And so we came up with, they said, you know, maybe they gave a list of ideas of things to do, and this was one of them.
I'd like to make a suggestion.
I don't want to be a cynic here, but this could blow up.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it. You know
Bigfoot, yeah.
the white savior phenomenon, right?
Yeah,
Of course,
yeah,
of course.
And
Micah,
good point. I have a question, excuse me,
I'd like to.
Dr. Stevens. I think you have some really, and John, you both have very good points. And obviously you've been working on this, not only with black-white relationships, but Islamic relationships. Is there anything, what would be the most important thing that you could see do this?
Westminster Church has a working relationship with First Shiloh Baptist Church on Spring Street.
Mhm.
We're doing healing circles with them. Tom Yorty can tell you all about it. We've had several meetings with them. This would be a time to approach them and see if they have a youth group who could join us
Yeah.
on Sunday afternoon.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great
That'd
idea.
be a great idea.
I will absolutely write that down and see. It's kind of, it's, you know, it's this week. So, but maybe if not, maybe if they can't do
Well,
this
they
week, you know,
probably
there's some time in the
delayed.
future that we can do.
And the other thing is, I would suggest you contact Jerome Wright and see if a group from Elam would join us.
Caitlin, I'm sorry for raising this so late. When Micah
Well,
mentioned,
you never know. They might
No,
just do them.
I simply assumed that other churches were involved, including East Side churches.
I'm talking about East Side
I
Church.
think your kids should be prepared for the possibility of a cold reception.
And
I
you
think
know
you've
what?
got a good point. I think that's a very good point. Yeah.
And if we get a colder reception, then that's something that we'll talk about. And we'll talk about how the importance of, you know, when we come into neighborhoods that don't belong to us and how we should act in those neighborhoods.
Phil,
And
you
we'll-
had a word for it. What was something of my translation, imperious white? I'm
The
going to-
white savior?
Oh, thank you. That's it. I'm
That's
78.
a-
I forget
I
things
think that's
quickly.
a Hollywood term or a literary term, you know, like the movie The Help.
Well,
Yes.
got shut
Okay.
down.
So we know what to do, and we're going to come in and help you become like us, kind of thing. And yeah, that could create resentment. You know, a lot of Buffalo teachers, our job is to make sure that everyone gets along. So I would always make them more afraid of me than each other. I go, you know, we're not going to do anything here. And the kids are more receptive, but boy, you get them out on the green in a park, it's not an enclosed place that you can control. You're the cultural anthropologist. You know all the words for these things. What is it called when you have a closed system? I'm sorry to pick on it.
This is a Sunday afternoon. If it's a nice day, there are going to be a lot of local people in that park.
There will be a lot of people.
And they're going to be 90% or more African American.
Yeah.
And in comes a bunch of white kids with bags and rakes and whatever.
And good shoes, you know.
Well, instead of throwing cold water on the whole idea, why don't you follow my suggestions? Contact First Shiloh Baptist and see if their youth program, or their youth would join us. And the other is contact Jerome Wright.
Mhm.
And he's a deacon at Elam. And they have a program called Shofar. It's a program for reaching out to the neighborhood. And they might be delighted to join us. Now, Phil, we did this for years with Jews and Muslims, a program called Mitzvah Day.
I know. I was part of that back in the day when I didn't have a back problem and I could participate.
Yeah, back in the 90s.
But
And it was
they
very
were
successful.
they were alerted in advance. They were
Yeah.
shared in the planning.
Well, You can
We
try.
do have somebody who regularly does this. Will be leading us in this activity. So this is something that Joe Allen regularly does. He's a friend of Lafayette. I don't know if Paul or Karen know them, but they regularly do this kind of thing and actually asked us. They attended our climate change thing and they said, do you want to really do something about climate change? Here's something that you can do about climate change. And so
Okay.
that's where all of this is kind of coming from, and obviously the PCSA being pushed on it. But I do
Okay.
appreciate your feedback. I do want to say we've got maybe 2 more minutes left. So if anybody has any last minute ideas or thoughts, obviously, like we said, this is not the end all be all of this conversation. This is the conversation that, is going to continue. And I'd love to.
It was a great 6 weeks, and I agree with the gentleman that we should do it again more often.
I second my own comments. Caitlin and Micah, well done. It was really, it's kudos to you.
Well, thank you. All right, I will pray us out and then we'll head out. All right.
Okay.
Creator God, we thank you so much for the opportunity to come together in conversation. We thank you for the opportunity to learn. And of course, the fact that we believe that education should lead us to action. We thank you for the action items and plans and thoughts and brainstorming that happened this evening. And we pray that those things will not just die here, but will have legs to go on out and get done and get the work done. We thank you for all of the opportunities ahead of us and all the things that our churches have already done. And we pray that you would be with us in our new committees and our old committees in doing the work that's ahead of us, no matter how daunting or big or small it might seem. We ask all these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good
Thanks
night.
again. Good
Night,
night,
all.
everybody.